Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. This is Life List, a birding podcast. I am George Armstead here with my co-hosts Mollee Brown and Alvaro Jaramillo. We got the gang back together, guys. How's it going?
Good.
It's going good.
Wow.
The whole gang's back.
I know. You guys are strangers practically.
Yeah, we've got months to catch up on, as we were just figuring out, going back to where we had our last roundtable.
Yeah, serious.
We also thought that recording in the morning would be a livelier episode than last night, as we had planned, but I don't think any of us are ready for this either.
I don't know. It's like I think I'm okay actually. I'm worried about George though.
I was gonna say you look like you feel better than I do. I think I'm cruising on about 3.5 hours of sleep for really no good reason at all. Yeah.
See what happens.
We do. We have a very stinky house here.
Wow.
We have a very stinky house due to
from a porch guest.
A very stinky dog, and our dog got stunkified by a striped skunk.
Wow.
Just a few short days ago.
Are you assuming it was a striped skunk due to distribution, or can you identify it from the smell, George?
Man, I wish I was that good.
It wasn't a hognose skunk that happened to have been released from a local zoo.
Wow.
That you would have said, "Oh my gosh, this is not a striped skunk."
Man, I wish I had that level of talent and expertise. Nay, Alvaro. Yeah, we'll see.
After the third or fourth.
My biggest fear is that Sully, our dog's golden retriever, who, I feel like they're designed to retain stink of skunk, is that he's starting to like it a little bit. He definitely didn't like it when it happened, but I feel like as time goes on here, he's sort of like, yeah, you know what? Kind of starting to settle into this a little bit.
I'm one of those people that likes the smell of gasoline when I'm at the station. And some people get grossed out. I like the smell of gasoline, and I'm like, I shouldn't. It's dumb. It does not smell good, but there I am liking it.
I know.
It's like probably an emotional connection to road trips or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was on the phone with Kristen in the airport, and she's like. She was outside, and she's like, "Wait, what's happening? I think Sully just got sprayed by a skunk." And I was like, "You think?" I was like, "I don't think there's like if you think it happened, it probably didn't happen." And then it became clear that was exactly what had happened, and we think he got bitten on the nose. He's got a little pink spot on his nose.
Wow.
We're hoping will not be a scar, but we had to get a rabies booster. It was a whole thing. I felt bad. I felt bad for the dog, and I felt worse for Kristen, who really had to deal with it mostly before I got home. And I got home and just mostly have been complaining about the stench. That's been my role. So anyway, that's the news here at the Chateau de Chouette here.
So what is the latest? What is the latest? Is tomato juice really just BS and you should use something else? Or?
It's BS, man. That's BS. That's like everyone we've talked to asks about that. And it's like there's nothing there. What you do is it's a combo of baking soda, peroxide, and Dawn dish soap, or, a soapy dish detergent thing with some water. And you kind of massage that in. You got to be careful not to get it in the dog's eyes or mouth because, those things are not great for them. And then you let it sit there, hopefully for about 10 minutes. Rinse, wash, repeat ad nauseum until the stink subsides. I think we've given him 2 scrubs just recently. It's better than it was for sure, but it's still pretty rank.
Was the tomato option something that was started by the tomato companies? Is this like Hallmark?
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. It's like Mother's Day or what have you that, theoretically was started by the card companies or flour or whatever. Not saying we shouldn't have Mother's Day. Please, all mothers back out there, don't write in.
Mother's Day started just south of here, as did Father's Day. Yeah, in my hometown by Anna Jarvis. But I think Hallmark took a hold of it after that. But George, do you consider yourself in Heinz country at all? I mean,
Heinz?
It's Heinz ketchup.
Oh, I would say so. I mean, I really feel like
yeah.
I mean, Western Pennsylvania obviously is like kind of the heart of that. But I mean, I would say so. I mean, the Hines National Wildlife Refuge is here.
That's true.
In Philly. So named for the senator. So I feel like, we are. Perhaps some would take exception to that.
Yeah. I was curious how much of a loaded question that is. There's some lobbying happening there. But I don't think Heinz is even headquartered in Pittsburgh anymore. I think Kraft owns it, but I could be wrong on
It's sort of like,
too.
Philadelphia cream cheese is based in Ohio. It's like everybody assumes it's like a Philadelphia thing, but it's
Philly,
not, doesn't really, I don't think it has anything to do with Philadelphia, really.
Are you going to tell me that Rice-A-Roni is not in San Francisco?
It may be the San Francisco treat owl, but the rest is really, it's open to
China.
Debate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They're going to put tariffs on Rice-A-Roni?
Good God. There's nothing holy.
Heinz, the big Heinz company was in, I'm not sure if it's still functioning, in Leamington, Ontario, right by Point Pelee. So if you went to Point Pelee, you'd go, the biggest thing you would see before getting out to the more natural wonders of it with the Heinz Canada kind of corporation.
Go figure.
Looks like
I haven't been there for a while.
Looks like it's still headquartered in Pittsburgh.
Is it? I forget what I was just reading something about. I don't know why. Something about, I think, just bigger companies, merging in that regard. But I am amazed. Is this the first time Sully's been sprayed?
It is, actually.
That's crazy.
I know.
You've talked about that skunk from the beginning of this podcast.
I know. And
I'm sorry it happened, but man.
And I'll never forget the time, like it was around dusk. Often I'll sit out there on the phone at dusk throwing the Frisbee for him. One time I was talking to Doug Gotchfeld. I was sitting in a little lawn chair throwing the Frisbee. Sully comes back to me, brings the Frisbee, drops, and there's a skunk walking directly towards me behind him, like 30 feet away. Sully never even saw it. And I was like, good God. And I was like, it just feels like it should have happened like 3 times by now at least. It is, as you say, pretty remarkable. This is the first time. Hopefully he doesn't like it too much and remembers that he really hated it initially. Mm-hmm. So
Did it affect his eyes at all?
Thankfully, no. Yeah, because as you know, I'm sure, Molly, like if they get a direct hit in the eyes or mouth, you actually got to take them to emergency care.
Yeah.
So thankfully, no. I think this was a pretty minor thing. I think the skunk we got here is a veteran of encounters with dogs, probably knew all he had to do was just, tap him off a little snort to smell, and that was it. But man, it's lasting.
Yeah, city skunks.
Yeah.
At Hazleton Prison, where I finished my course, I did my spring course. It was awesome. I don't know if I talked about it on here since the first day that I did it, but it went really, really well. It was just a super engaged group, and everything we did was discussion-based about birds and nature and kind of rolling off of what was there, close by in the prison. But there's a family of skunks that lives in the dumpsters behind the kitchen. And apparently, I haven't seen this family of skunks, but everybody just lets them go. They have babies, and the guards don't care. The kitchen staff feeds them scraps, and they just live in harmony. And I guess have been there for years. Yeah, isn't that cool?
That is really cool.
They have a groundhog too that I guess they let come inside sometimes.
Prison skunks.
Yeah.
The best cared skunks in the world. Yeah.
They already got the outfit. The outfit's pretty much on par. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Their little menagerie of animals. They had the skunks, the groundhog, turkeys come in a lot because there's a beautiful big wooded area and then just lots of maintained fields around there, and house sparrows and starlings and barn swallows and cliff swallows are all around, and that's kind of the core group that hangs out. It's pretty fun.
Now that I'm on my 4th night in my new place, that's how little I've been here, even though we moved in on the end of May. So I've been traveling so much, and I'm surprised at how few introduced species I'm seeing here. There's one real crazy one, which is the place has more mute swans than I've ever seen in my whole life.
Wow.
40 to 60 at any time if I look out in the lake.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do they allow people on the lake with the with the swans? I mean, that's like a motorcycle gang of swans out there, man. Yeah. It's pretty intimidating.
I mean, it's in the shallow part of it's Lake Ontario, so it's a huge lake. But I think once it gets deeper, they're not there. They're in the shallower stuff. But I saw a flock of starlings, and I have not seen a house sparrow at all. I have not seen a house finch. No pigeon. It's really interesting to me, like how we always assume that introduced birds are sort of everywhere. Right. And then they're really not. They do have their habitats. I'm sure all of those will come through, but
yeah. I'd be interested to hear Mollee, but I think I've had pigeon at my house 4 or 5 times in the 4.5 years we've been here. We don't get them very often.
No, really? I think I've had pigeons once.
Yeah, where you are, I'm not surprised. Starlings probably a bit more, and house sparrows might be tricky for you.
House sparrow we got on Christmas there was one at the
Merry
bird feeder
Christmas.
on Christmas, and it was a new yard bird. Starlings have taken over a failed kestrel box this year. But other than that, I mean, they would come through a bit, and they had checked out the house last spring, but there aren't many starlings around. Yeah, it's the same kind of deal. There's a pair of house finches here, which is weird. They're here now this spring. They were still at the feeder when I got back after being away for a couple weeks, and that also feels weird. There are purple finches breeding on the next property over, so that'd be more fun. But it's the same kind of deal here. It's pretty nice.
Interesting. I don't know, I don't know if we've talked since I've actually been here, but one of the first things I saw before we'd moved in was a bald eagle, which was kind of interesting. It's like
it's American bald-headed eagle.
Yeah, American bald-headed eagle.
Yeah.
And then the day we moved in, there was a Carolina wren singing in the backyard, and I was thinking how Carolina wren was incredibly rare when I was a young birder in Ontario. And then also from the other side, ravens flew by, and raven this far south would have been incredibly rare when I was a young birder. So if you had birds move north and birds move south, that for me are completely I'm excited to see them. Well, probably any birder who started in Ontario in the last 5 years is probably like, oh yeah, you see ravens here and there. But for me, it's still like, don't you understand, young birder person?
What about black vultures and red-bellied woodpeckers? Are those red-bellies may be more common? I don't know.
Yeah, red-bellies are pretty common, but they didn't used to be. Black vultures are I think down in Niagara, they've established, and
they winter even. Actually, I know. I think they overwinter in Niagara now.
Yeah, and so I'm sure I'll see those eventually.
Yeah.
And locally here, and also it's another Niagara bird, something that was completely unheard of. I think there were 2 records for Canada, was fish crow. And locally, there was one reported a few weeks ago here, and in Niagara, there's apparently you can go see a flock of them that sleep somewhere. So there's a lot of changes, and of course, some of them are positive too in conservation wise. I do have the chance, if I was super lucky, to find Kirtland's warbler in the area, right? That just would have been 0 chance back in the day. It's kind of interesting to sort of have this old school mindset coming in here, because it actually, it really creates an interesting kind of dynamic of learning. I think if I'd been here the whole time, I may not have noticed as well some of the major changes in distribution and abundance. But yesterday, what was super cool was, sitting out, looking out in the lake, and a Least Bittern flew by, and I was just thinking, okay, I live with Least Bitterns. That's
awesome.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Always a cool bird. I don't think it's maybe if you're in Florida, parts are sort of super common at times, and you had your friend that you drove down to Florida, Mollee. But it's just a cool little bird. And I was thinking, another one that would really shake me up if I saw one around here, which is highly probable, is black-billed cuckoo. I mean, I have not seen black-billed cuckoos that much in the last decades of birding. So it's kind of neat to think of those.
Yeah, it
Al,
is.
am I right that where you are isn't that where some of the Corey's Least Bittern records are from? Is from
Toronto.
There?
Yeah, Toronto. Yeah.
Okay.
That's where the major, where my mom lives, is exactly where they were, but that marsh is gone. So yeah. So I was thinking,
folks don't know what that is. Corey's Least Bittern, which I think is basically just a rare color morph, right? They're very dark. They're really blackish, almost maybe melanistic. I don't know, but they Sibley actually has got a nice little piece on them. and they are beautiful. They look beautiful. Like to see
chestnut.
one. Yeah, really rich
blackish,
chestnut and black. Yeah, so it's like it looks in every respect Least Bittern, except structurally and everything, of course. Dark bill, very black overall with rich chestnut. So were you to see one, I think anybody that doesn't know one, if you were to see one, you'd probably be like, well, what is that? It looks like a Least Bittern, but pretty distinctive.
I'm not sure that anybody has seen one for decades. It's thought that it may just like not exist anymore, or at least be so rare. I thought
there were some photos fairly recently from Florida or something. Oh. I could be wrong about that.
I'll link that Sibley article in our show notes.
Yeah. But you know what, though? Like, separate from all of this, today is July 1st, Canada Day. So, and in a few days, it's July 4th, USA Day. So it's kind of like, so happy July 1st, Canada Day, happy July 4th to everybody out there. And may your grilling be great and your festivities be birdie and whatever.
Well said.
To me, it kind of 4th of July almost marks the beginning of fall migration. It's like it's early still, but it's like where I always talk about how, to me, at least around here in the Philadelphia area, I kind of regard June as the off season, which is, of course, not a good way to think about it at all. But usually many of us are just so birded out after birding our butts off in May that by the time June rolls around, migration has slowed. It's harder to motivate to get out. But of course, it actually is a very good month to go out and find, do some atlasing for if there's a state atlas project going on, or get into, breeding birds and documenting those. But it's also probably a very good vagrancy month, June. But the truth is, aside from doing often Alaska tours in June, I don't really do much birding around here. But usually by like mid-July, I'm like, oh, there's shorebirds moving, songbirds are starting to move. And I start thinking about that usually right around now.
Could it be that you are quite a urban birder? You've lived in urban situations. So like, I think if you're in a place that's got a lot of woodlots and stuff that you sort of go walk your dogs in, June is actually superb because you're hearing all the nesting birds and stuff. Like that was my take on in Half Moon Bay and stuff. People in the city would be like, oh, there's nothing going on. And I'd be like, nothing going on. It's like, it's full of birds, Could it be? Could it be the urban Philadelphia lifestyle that you so
Well, of course,
cherish?
I'm considerably more suburban now, and I do find myself watching.
That's still urban.
Yeah. I do find myself watching the birds that I know are nesting and enjoying them. We've got a couple pairs of catbirds around. I haven't really been able to figure out what it is, but every evening around they're finished now and they're away from the nest. But for much of June and late May, I was watching a pair of catbirds nesting in some neighbors' forsythia. Here I planted all these wonderful plants, and then they go and nest in the forsythia and the neighbors' plants. I was a little miffed about that, but every dusk, one, I presume the male, but I don't know, would come in and kind of do this like sort of soft whisper song, like while quivering, basically all of its feathers, perched, sort of posturing, turning a little bit, and just quivering all its feathers. I assumed this was maybe some sort of pair bonding thing where it would feed. Usually it ended up feeding the female. Again, I'm making some presumptions about the sex. Don't know exactly. But this happened every night for a week or so before I left, and enjoyed watching that. Also, like this year, for the first year that I've been here, we've had blue jays nesting in the yard. So I've seen some baby blue jays going around. Somebody's feeding them peanuts, and so there's a lot of peanuts being carried. And the gardening has been a lot of fun as well. But I think you're probably right, Al, that especially living in urban areas, it's easy to feel as though there's not much happening because there's just simply not much nesting going on. Where Mollee is, on the other hand, I suspect you've got quite a few breeding birds.
Yeah, June's my favorite month.
That proves it right there.
There you go.
I think that's solid proof. Yeah. On the note of the native shrubs and whatnot, we have now, Jimmy and I don't necessarily agree on this approach, but we've kept some of our autumn olive that are our biggest shrubs in the field, and we've kind of taken it out in waves, and we take a little bit more each year because it's the most established shrubbery that we've had in the field. We're 3 solid summers into owning this now, and some other stuff is growing up more, and we keep taking out a little bit more. But as that's the first few years, the nesting was just concentrating more and more in the autumn olive that we left up. And I don't know, it's kind of sad. You lose birds when you're taking out those bigger established shrubs, regardless of what they are, because the birds absolutely use a lot of autumn olive around here. But
it's good cover, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's used throughout the year more than most anything else.
Can you, like, without, you bring up the point in a sense, like, can one be so focused on native plants that you can lose focus of habitat?
Habitat?
Yeah, like habitat function, that a plant could actually be like neutral or even beneficial in some ways, but not be native.
Yeah. I think autumn olive is a fantastic case study for that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of use for it. We spend so much time talking about this and planting our land because it was mowed about once a year before we came out here as well. So we've got this 15-acre field that has all of these young maples coming up. And, we're kind of talking like, do we let it kind of go into this early succession? Do we keep it mowed? Do we want to like have a couple species of birds or anything else that we're trying to target to create habitat for and plan around that? Do we let it go? Do we consider the resources that it would take to maintain meadow? I think it's a good question, and I do know that we're not taking some of these plants off the face of North America. They exist. It's not a matter of keeping them from spreading when they're established across the whole continent in some ways. So then what does it come down to? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have a solid field of a monoculture of rosebush or, multiflora rose or anything either. It's scattered and isolated, and it is a small enough scale in our case that we can maintain it pretty well. We cut and daub it with herbicide just on the woody stumps, and that's the method that we've found works best after trying a lot of different things. So I think it's a good question.
Yeah. It's one of the interesting bits that, like, traveling around with Peter Burke on this last tour where, he's such a well-rounded naturalist as well as a real great birder. He said that just insect diversity is one of the things that if you track that, if you're doing kind of your checking out what insects are around and then putting together your lists of insects on iNaturalist, if your habitat management gets you a greater insect diversity over time, you're doing something right. In a sense. And often it's native plants, right? But I thought that was kind of cool that you could have goals, targets that were separate from birds and the plants themselves, but you could see, oh, wow, we have this now, or we didn't have that moth, or we didn't in the past. But it takes some work to actually track all that.
That's exactly what we've done. We've kind of looked at pollinators and plants. And it's absolutely amazing. And when we first started working on that here, it just blew my mind that you could harvest some seeds from somewhere. You find them on, I don't know, a roadside or whatever. And we had gone through some old strip mines that were getting built on the following year, and we had taken a bunch of seeds from them and scattered them here a couple years ago. The next year, the plants come up, and then you find some pollinators with them. Like it was crazy to me, especially in starting by thinking about, honestly, birds and bird habitat and how many years it takes to work on. I mean, the big government programs here, golden winged warbler and cerulean warbler, where you can get federal funding for that. That is such a crazy long-term thing to look at compared to native plants. And I'll tell you what has blown my mind all over again this year, it's even faster, is we have a lot of water on our property. It's super wet. We're down to the water table. There are springs coming up everywhere, and we have a half mile of creek that's 15 feet wide that runs through here too. So I didn't think that creating like what you might call microhabitats with water would make much of an impact. But we have worked on just kind of rerouting some of the water runoff that was coming around the house and everything, and have just hand dug out little ponds of 4 by 4 feet in a couple places. And the amount of amphibian and reptile diversity that we see just like instantly, it's coming in, just the amount of frogs that have increased and salamanders and snakes has been even faster than the pollinator habitat. And it's been really fun. That's been the highlight of my year on our property, is that project and how quickly we saw results.
That's amazing.
It's really cool.
You know, in Philly, I've got a group of friends. We call them plant nerd gatherings, where like 5 or 6 of us will get together and we'll walk each other around each other's yards and be like, all right, this is what I got growing here. I'm thinking about doing this. You know, I'm thinking maybe I could do this. Do you guys have any ideas? What do you think? And that's been really fun, actually.
The image I'm getting is like a parking lot full of like lowriders and all the lowrider people like walking around each other's cars going, wow, those are nice rims, you know, like whatever. Or it could be whatever other, like Mustangs, you know, whatever. But it's like all the car people. You're like, you got your little plant people, you know, all come around. Maybe a beer in hand, perhaps. I don't know.
Maybe. Yes. Yeah, sometimes, sometimes mojitos in the hot weather, you know, it just depends. Yeah. No, it is. My friend Robin the other day sent me a meme. It's like an image of a guy standing with a cocktail looking at his garden. And he's like, Friday nights, I used to be lit, whatever, you know, and look at me now. I'm just standing at my garden with a drink, staring at plants. And I really feel like there is some absolute truth to that. But one of the ones we ended up talking about, one of the plants we ended up talking about at our last plant nerd gathering was the mulberry, not the native mulberry. It was like Constantinople mulberry. It was white, or is it white mulberry? Is that the other name? I forget. It's not the native one, but it's everywhere, popping up all over the place. And I think that is actually one, Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, where if folks want to start, that's a, kind of the Bible, the toehold if you want to get into native plant stuff. Often people will start with that book. And I think it's in that book, or maybe he discusses it elsewhere, about how he lets those mulberries go. They're not native. They're, but they're widely established. Birds seem to like them a lot, and they actually appear to be pretty high yield for insects, particularly caterpillars and, the kinds of stuff that ends up being bird food a lot of the time. So we have a bunch sprouting up here in our yard in Philly, and I've been debating. I don't think I'm not going to let them get huge, but big ones can be big bird feeders. And to cut one of those down, you'd actually be removing, a lot of food. It'd be something you'd have to wrestle with before doing it.
We have a ton of serviceberry here.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I gather that's like a native, but it also has cultivars that are kind of gardening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but those can be less productive, the cultivars sometimes for wildlife.
We got a ton of that here.
You should check out your caterpillars on the serviceberry over the next couple months and see how those compare. Okay. If you have both, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Speaking of, George, have you ever put a moth light up at your
I have
place?
Not. That's like the next thing I want to do. I want to. We're gonna dig a pond. I want a pond for dragonflies and frogs. We have just enough space. I think I can barely pull that off. And then I've been thinking about blacklighting and putting up a sheet and seeing what we can find.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. I think we should shift gears here, guys, because Al, you just hinted at a little something you've been doing lately. In fact, you just got back, days ago from the Great White North. Hey there, Life List friends. Wanted to tell you about something that I'm pretty excited about. And I'm not even talking about that Steiniger Scoter that I just got as a life bird while guiding a Hillstar Nature trip up there in Nome, Alaska. That was pretty exceptional. It was an amazing day overall. You can actually hear more about it in the latest bonus episode on our Patreon. Talk about that. We talk about bears and some other amazing sightings. But what I really wanted to tell you that I was excited about is that we got some new friends that have joined Patreon. I'm talking about our friends like Mamie Brower. Thanks, Mamie. Carl Winstead. Hey, you. John Sortos. Hey, Jen Roberts. Amanda Garcia. Susan Berthelot. You were with me looking at that Steiniger Scoter. And I'm talking to you, Scott Frazier, and you, Scott Thomas, as well. Thanks to all you guys for joining Patreon, supporting us. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. It's really an honor to do what we do. Thanks for listening, and we will have more good content coming for you. Join Patreon, and you can support us here at Life List, a birding podcast. Thanks, everybody.
well, I am in the Great White North, but I got back from another Great White North. So it's been crazy because I was in Finland, Norway, then Svalbard. Got back home now here in Ontario for one night before I went back to the airport in order to fly back to California to do some paperwork and stuff, but also 2 pelagic trips. Flew back yesterday, well, overnight, so I arrived back yesterday. But
this, by the way, folks, is part of the reason we're a little bit late with this episode. Just so
been kind of flying around. But 2 pelagic trips to the Farallon Islands. Both of them had booby. Sundays, a beautiful adult female Cocos booby. Saturday, a booby that got away. My gosh. Is Liam Murphy, one of the birders?
Good title there, Mollee, for the episode. Yeah, the booby that got away.
The booby that got away. Liam Murphy, one of the San Francisco birders, ex-Santa Cruz birders, who's, a good friend, he said, look at this thing, and it was this distant. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a booby. And it was far, close enough and in good enough light that you could see a lot of stuff on it. You could see certain things. Usually I sort of have, my mind immediately goes to boom something with boobies because you sort of go, oh, it's one of the Nazca types or it's a brown booby. This one is sort of like, what the heck is that? And I first sort of thought it was kind of grayish brown. And I thought that this is all very quick, like milliseconds in my head. It's grayish brown like a blue-footed booby, but it's not because it doesn't have all the white spots on the back, on the neck and all that. Then I thought, well, it's not a brown booby because it's too uniform and pale, and it doesn't have the white on the underwing. It's too. And then I was like, it's a young red-footed booby. That's what it is. It's kind of redfoot, which is really quite one of the rare ones. If you're going to go booby, and especially in San Francisco, it's a rare booby. But we didn't get good enough photographs. We all agreed it was really weird enough that we could exclude brown booby and various other things. And we kind of got to this, what do we do? Because we're all kind of on the fence of it must have been a red-footed booby, and we were hoping that we were going to go back to the Farallons the next day and see this beautiful subadult red-footed booby sitting on the cliff. But instead, there was a brown booby. But then again, we were like, but that adult brown booby is nothing like what we saw. So the one that got away, that's one thing to, it's kind of exciting weekend to start off the pelagic season where, you just never know out there. And these boobies are getting more common all over the West Coast. New paper about that. In fact, every single booby species that used to occur in the West Coast has become more common over time. All of them.
Interesting.
All of them. Even the one we don't think of as getting that much more common, mass booby, it still has had an increase just further south. That's, warmer waters. I was in Finland and Norway and then Svalbard. And the way that works is Svalbard is an island group that is way, way, way north. This is further north than anywhere you can get to in Alaska. We got to 81 degrees north.
Wow.
Right? I did not see
Barrow is
night.
Barrow is 71. Utqiagvik,
Yes.
the northernmost point in the U.S., 71.
71.
Yeah.
I did not see night for about 3 weeks because even in the Finnish part of the trip, night was between 12 and 2 a.m. And, I was sleeping. So it's you just did no darkness for all this time. And we had 2 trips back to back. So the Finland, Norway, and then Svalbard. And you fly to Svalbard from Oslo. So it was kind of I was in various airports and so forth. But I think the first thing to sort of say is that Finland, Norway is not what I expected in so many ways. I knew it was mostly Finland, birding the forests of Finland, for owls and grouse and all this stuff and other specialty. Then you get up to the far north and it's more tundra-like and you have a coastal area and it sort of shifts gears. But I found the Norway birding so much fun, just crazy, open country with, breeding shorebirds and then visits to seabird colonies with, thousands of both species of murres and razorbills and Atlantic puffins and all that kind of stuff. Geese and all this, just great stuff. Finland was super, super birdy in terms of how many things you saw, but you kind of were, each day was one target in the morning, one target in the afternoon. It was very specific. We're going to go look for the nesting Tengmalmsowl, which is boreal owl today, we're going to go see the nesting great gray owl today in the morning. Then we're going to go look for, little buntings or rustic buntings over here, or there's a nest box for a gray-headed chickadee. It was very much like it was almost like a twitch, like twitching, along. And I almost felt like I never was just walking around Finland birding. It was a little different than I expected. And probably there'll be some shift I'll do when I do this tour again, because there are some things that are much more interesting to a European birder than to a North American birder. Because, we spent some time like looking for, Blythe's reed warbler. We were at some spot, where Blythe, which is a nighttime singer. There's several of these nighttime singers, and we spent time there, and there was a lot of talk of Blythe's reed warbler and where they've been seen and whatever. But our folks were like, look, garden warbler, oh my God, which is a much more common European bird. Right. So the mindset of a European birder versus a North American birder being there meant that we could have spent more time just watching common stuff.
Right.
I think, in the future than, going for all the little here and there's, type of thing. But still, you see so many of the things that are vagrants in Alaska, they're just breeding there. You go see a dotterel and there's blue throats and there's red-throated pipits and all these things are just there, meadow pipits, tree pipits. And I thought that was super, super fun.
And in breeding plumage too.
Breeding plumage.
Right, yeah.
Breeding plumage. I did not spend any time in Helsinki. So I flew up to this small city of Oulu, and then we went further north into the Arctic Circle and all that. And one thing that I was dismayed by is that, first of all, breakfast is the bread there is amazing. Super good bread, But lunch and dinner was sometimes sort of like, not so exciting, just mashed potatoes, boiled carrots. And then I thought, but hold on a second, I cannot be evaluating Finnish cuisine by essentially, this is almost like being 300 kilometers north of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and assessing Canadian cuisine
right
from the more limited fare that might be available to folks. Places that are just out of the way, right? Like, so I don't want to disparage the Finnish food, but Norway, and they had the ocean. So there was all this awesome cod, so then that's unfair too, because there's no ocean in the central part of Finland. So, but anyways, it made this sort of like, the birding's really, really fun here, and the food is great here, but it's just the way it happened. I don't think that's actually the truth. But that was something that sort of stayed with me. Some of the best cod I've ever had, probably because it was fresh. Like most of the cod most of us have is frozen, from months ago.
As good as the blue cod in the Chathams?
No, because that was tainted. That whole situation was so tainted, I cannot even talk about it without being brought into a time that...
All right, I'll take your word for it.
But we got to see kittiwake hotels. Those are these places where they make like little boxes for kittiwakes. So just like hundreds of kittiwakes will nest in these boxes that they put up on a building, on the side of a building.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, and it used to be like they'll find a little ledge in an old house, and the kittiwake will get 2 or 3 nests. But now they've just started making these big, 4 by 10 structures, and each one's little box, and each one's got its own little kittiwake. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kittiwakes in some of these coastal towns in Norway. And it's just cool to have the kittiwakes just flying around all over the place, and that the people kind of like them, and they kind of make spots for them. There are many things that I found like unexpected, like white-tailed eagles, much more common than I expected. I thought they were pretty rare in Europe, but up in that part of Finland, Norway, there's a lot of eagles. I think they've probably, become more common. And so it was all very, very cool, really cool to do that part. But Svalbard was a whole different animal. That was very different. And I can tell you about that.
Yeah, there was some big white bear imagery I saw from some of our friends that were with you there. And even it looked like a little bit of pink gull imagery as well.
That's what I saw.
That's what you saw. Yeah, Svalbard. So you fly up to this place that is so far north that essentially you're too far north for most Arctic birds. Like, that is one of the things that really hits you, like, because you think, why are there no longspurs, horned larks here? You're just too far north. And there's an ocean crossing, so it makes it a little difficult. The only passerine there is snow bunting, so that's it. And then everything else is either waterfowl, loon, like red-throated loon, or a seabird. So there's a lot of glaucous gulls, pink-footed goose, barnacle goose. Both of those geese were actually new for me. I'd never seen them. And in fact, now there's only one true goose that I've not ever seen, which is the red-breasted goose.
I was going to ask if that's the one. That's a good one to get.
So we'll see about one day seeing that. But you get on a ship, and if you've never been on, we've been talking a lot about ship-based trips here over the years, but this is actually a ship-based trip that is short. It's like a week. And if you've never really sort of been on a ship and you're wondering, could I do Antarctica or whatever? Actually, Svalbard is a good intro because the weather's much more calm. You get a sense for what ship life is like. You get to see all sorts of cool things. And then you're kind of back in a week to port. But what you do is you sort of go into various different places in the archipelago and you look for anything you can find. Mostly people are looking for Arctic fox, polar bear, the average person on the ships, and beluga, walrus, sort of are the main things, the non-bird things. And if you have birders on board, they're usually looking for ivory gull. That's sort of the one that I think is the main one. The ship went into various spots, and we did find a polar bear at one point in Svalbard. And when you're in Svalbard, the rules are very specific as to how close you can. I think it's 500 meters. It's the closest you can get to a bear if it doesn't kind of walk to you. So we were quite a distance away looking in the scope at this bear that was sleeping. But then the thing that the ships do is go offshore into the pack ice where they will look for bears, and that's where you will see the gulls and the ivory gulls and so forth. And that changes everything because you're in the middle of nowhere. There are no rules about the bears at that point. You're sort of in open, so if the bear is closer, that's fine. You don't have to sort of retreat or keep the ship away from the bear in that same way. But we had one day that was just fantastic. A bear was seen quite in the distance, a polar bear sort of sleeping, and it was on a flat piece of ice. So we went around on this ship and basically parked the ship. It was a quarter of a mile away. It seemed pretty far off, and we just sat there looking at this bear, and the bear eventually just got up and started sniffing, and it could smell us. So it got curious and started walking towards the ship really slowly, and we all just sat there waiting, and it got so close that we were looking down on the bear from the ship, and it would sometimes lick the air with his black tongue and sniff around like it kind of knew there was. I mean, he could see us at that point. It's like these things look tasty, but I don't know how to break open that shell on that thing.
Get up to get those things.
Get those things.
Yeah, they smell good though, man.
Smell good, and it was so close, and people were so quiet, like dead quiet, that you could hear the crunching of the snow as it walked, like.
What?
And it was a beautiful bear, like it. It wasn't dirty. Sometimes the polar bears you can see in Alaska even, are just dirty with mud and crud and what have you. And it's awesome, but this was just pristinely white. And a male bear, we thought probably a young male, a few years old. And I bet the whole thing was 45 minutes to an hour just watching this bear. And then it came through and it kind of looked around, and then it just went right back to where it had been and just sat down again, like completely, obviously it got up because we were there and it was interested in us, but it was unperturbed by anything. Like if you have a dog, a dog when they're nervous, or some noise happens or something happens, and bears are like that too. If you watch black bear, they can get kind of like, something's bothering me. This thing was so calm, like nothing bothered this creature. And it is walking up to this ship and it doesn't give a crap. It's just really, it sort of is the king or queen of the Arctic,
Yeah, who's going to mess with that
Nobody's going to miss. And the paws, when you see them up close, are so huge. Like they're like dinner plate size things. And we found a lot of places where you could see the tracks on the ice. You realize how much they move around, but there's tracks everywhere of these bears that walk around. Wow. I'm sure we missed many of them, but it was pretty fantastic. If you saw, I think the photos, it might have been a video that I put. It was from my cell phone. I haven't even put the photos with the real camera. Could see. In fact, it was so close that one of the scientists there on board was able to see the length of the hairs that stuck out from the sort of penis area to say, oh, that's a male because the length of those hairs, blah blah blah. That's how close we were, to this thing. And it was really fantastic. But that same day, we saw Ivory Gulls. And Ivory Gulls would sometimes just fly over. But we had this one spot where and the Ivory Gulls just started landing on the ice nearby. We had 7 of them just sort of sit and land and call and do all their thing. So that was one of the main things I wanted to see up there was Ivory Gull. I was bummed that I never saw a young one. They were all adults. But I mean, that's like not something I should be bummed out.
I was going to say, I've seen 2 and they've both been young ones. I'd very much like to see an adult.
Yeah. So they seem to be doing all right. The Ivory Gulls, it seems to be like, there's sort of a steady population. But the craziest thing, and maybe perhaps one of the best birding experiences of my life, and I say this with a bittersweet kind of tinge because most people did not get to enjoy what we enjoyed, was that 4, 5, 6 of us were in the back of the boat just watching for Ivory Gulls and kittiwakes. And I was talking just some nonsense to Peter Burke. And with my eyeballs, I looked behind him and Ross's gull is flying right behind Peter's head. And I screamed out like you would never, it was a scream of just volume. Like you could not have
no actual words.
It was like, and that ship was, you could, people were waking up in cabins, further along. It was so loud that one of the staff members came out like a kind of right below us and thought it was man overboard. It's an area at Ross's gull, and he was like, oh, and he went in and they got, the ship to call them out. Meanwhile, most people were in watching a lecture about polar bears. So most of the ship was in this lecture room. And then the word goes out and the biologist who's giving the talk said, oh crap, I've never seen a Ross's gull. Everybody get out. So it's like, run. So it was pandemonium, but 2 Ross's gulls flew by. And if you can imagine, when we do boat trips, we often talk about 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock and all that. They were came in at about 5 o'clock, went forward to the ship, around the bow, so 12 o'clock, wrapped around the left side of the ship, went right back behind us again, cut across the 6 o'clock so that we could again see them. And those who had come up at that point from the screams who were close and had rushed right in, got to see them during that second pass. Some people on the front that got out to the front of the boat got to see them. But otherwise, it was probably 10% of the ship saw them, which was really, and I have these really wonderful photographs. So it's like people realize like, oh no, they were really close, It was like, it was kind of but that whole deal, like being there with sort of my good friend from being, kids together, just sort of seeing Ross's gull adults.
Had Peter ever seen Ross's gull before?
A youngster somewhere in Ontario, somewhere, yeah. So he was just, he's like, I thought I would never see that in my whole life, like an adult Ross's gull, and there it was. 2 of them, one of them may have been a little younger, but it's but they both were pink and had the both full deal. And maybe the thing that's most interesting out of all this, because seeing something is cool as birders, whatever, we have our birder stories, but some of the papers on Ross's gull numbers and people who used to see many of them used to see them there. It was at the ice in Svalbard in the 80s and 90s. There were records of hundreds of Ross's gulls. Doesn't happen anymore. Nobody sees them. In fact, the crew on the ship said that may be the first time that ship has seen Ross's gull in Svalbard. Maybe even if it's the second or third time, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's very rare. Adam Willane was going up there, and he sent me a note. Where were you? What was going on? He wanted the details because he's never seen them, and he's been up there a bunch of time, crunching through ice all over the Arctic. So I think these birds have shifted their distribution, or they're way, way, way more uncommon than they were in the past. And it made it sort of even more special to have seen these guys. But the other bit, too, is the one we've mentioned over time. It's like time on deck. Yeah. If you just invest your time out there, and it's hours often of not seeing anything different, sometimes it makes it so that you will see that one whale or bird that happens to go by at that one time. So that definitely seemed to be the case in this situation.
Luck and persistence. You usually need both those to accumulate the good sightings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Putting that time in sure generates some luck, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining it's kind of overwhelming for me to think about the amount of daylight that you have and the desire to be just watching all the time. Like, do people sleep at all?
You make time, right, to sleep. And there are times when you're close to shore where you're traveling from one place to the other, where the chances of seeing something that's really unique are less. And there's other times where you're at the ice edge, where you just want to be there as much as you can. And, the other things that happen too are dovekies. Like, dovekies are cool. We saw thousands of dovekies, both up in the hills breeding, but just in the ocean when they fly in little packs. They're so unlike merlets to me. I mean, they
buzz like little bees.
Yeah, like little bees going by really close to the ship, and they really look like a cartoon, of something like a mer, like a little baby. If the Japanese toy makers made a cartoon version of the mer, you'd get the dovekey.
What's the Instagram account that's like Borb a day?
Yeah,
there's a little bird orb. They're like perfect for that.
We also kind of made a comment about the fact that a lot of the birds in Svalbard are the birds that have two names, like parasitic jaeger, Arctic skua, red-throated diver versus red-throated loon. There's all of these, the mers versus...
Little auk and dovekey.
Yeah. And we kind of joke that dovekey is the name on the passport, but little auk is his rapper name. So then we had created these mental images of these little rapper little auks, LIL. So
I wouldn't mess with those little auks, man. It's got a lot of attitude there. It's like the little attitude. They'd be all over you,
Yeah. And then walrus, boy, those things are crazy looking. Just an insane. Who created this thing? It's basically like, what a weird looking creature. And they're huge. And they also, like, I've seen a lot of seals and a lot of sea lion type things. And these are kind of like right between. They're big, huge, and remind you of an elephant seal, yet they move like a sea lion. They're just so weird. And then you stick the big teeth on them, the tusks. This is crazy. So, it was there's some element in the birding world, if you had all the money in the world, because these things do cost, of course, you would say, why would you go to Svalbard just to see such a small, meager list of birds? But you go there and it's amazing that what the things you see are so cool, and many of them aren't birds, right? Just marine mammals and bears, the little Svalbard reindeer. And uniquely for Arctic environments, there's no lemmings up there. So it changes the entire ecosystem without lemmings. No Pomeranian Jaegers, no snow owls. Very interesting spot, yet lots and lots of geese, for example, and eiders. Wow. I loved it. Really thought it was cool. And I will go back again at some point. Hopefully get lucky with some bowhead whale in the next time.
We got lucky with those on my trip. We'll talk about that in Alaska. We saw some bowheads.
Wow.
So, but we're going to talk about Alaska in an upcoming episode.
Yeah. Too many icy places in one day would be too much. Right? That's right, Mollee?
Right. It's true. I have so many questions about Svalbard and that whole experience that maybe I'll save for another podcast too, because we're at an hour. But what is standing out to me from what you just said, what is the visual perception like when you're out there? Because you're not seeing other ships, right? Isn't it just you and ice and very large animals and very small animals? I can't wrap my head around what that must feel like, the perception of scale in a situation like that.
Yeah, there are ships, like when you get back to port, you realize there's a lot of ships working that area. But when you are out on the ice, you really don't see anybody else. And in most of the landings, they make it so that there's no other people around. But scale in these Arctic or Antarctic regions is so weird because big mountains, big glaciers. If you get to go on the Zodiac and walk somewhere, it is a small little tiny bit that you actually get to walk on versus the masses of terrain, and most of it entirely inaccessible in any way because it's, cold, wet. I mean, wet in terms of the spongy ground sometimes, and just unsafe to get too far away from the areas where you're walking because of the bears. And, and they have to, this was unique to me in my kind of travels where you had multiple people with guns all around you that were, looking out. And then, you see things sometimes from a ship when you're out in the ice and you're in this big thing looking at something small like a dovekie. And it's all kind of weird, but cool, and oddly enough, the ships are quiet enough that you don't feel like you're on this big, old, lumbering, noisy, awful thing. It feels much more peaceful than you would imagine going through the ice. You hear all the ice cracking and bumping the hull and just scraping, and then sometimes they just stop. And they did stop at one point in a flat piece of ice and had people just go and walk on the flat ice and take pictures on the sea ice. That was pretty cool.
Wow. Well, the sound of a polar bear walking, I guess, is a perfect illustration of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty
I
neat.
imagine you have to be there to really grasp what sort of mindset you have for a week in that sort of situation and habitat.
Yeah. And it's cold when you're in the ice too, right? Like you've got all your gear on and stuff and mittens and everything. And you don't feel like, if you're putting in the time to sort of see some of these things, you are braving the environment too. You're not just inside the warm cabin kind of looking out your window. There's a lot of it where you feel like, oh yeah, I'm here. I'm not a spectator, as I'm a participant in this cold Arctic region. And it's summer cold, but it's still cold, So
sounds pretty dreamy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I think we'll all be thinking of polar bear paws crunching the snow for some time. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Good one to think about. Yeah. Well, I think we got to scoot, guys, but we will be back at it again here soon. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And stay tuned for more from us here at Life List, a birding podcast. We'll be back again soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.